Welcome everybody. My name is Michael Walsh and I'm the CEO of PBEC, the Pacific Basin Economic Council. And I'm so excited to be announcing a new initiative where we're launching our new show called The Value Prop. What is The Value Prop? Well, The Value Prop is a series of shows where we bring invited guests from across the region within APEC. Starting with the Philippines, we're going to be working around different countries in Southeast Asia, East Asia, North Asia, and potentially even on the west coast of America as well. We'll see how far we get, but the idea is to get around as many as possible. So what will we be covering? Well, to give you a flavor of it, why don't you listen to our first couple of programs, which are going to be kicking off with the Philippines. And I'd love to introduce you shortly to our co-host for the entire series, which is Miguel Aboitiz, formerly from Aboitiz Power Corporation.
I'm your co-host, Miguel Aboitiz.
So the first episode, we like to call it the Philippines Endeavor. And the reason why we put that in the title is because we're going to be welcoming Manny Ayala, Managing Director of Endeavor Philippines. Alongside him, he's going to be bringing in some of his highest achieving entrepreneurs within their portfolio, such as Dustin Jefferson, Rexy Dorado, and Roland Ross. Dustin is the founder of UHoo, which is an air quality management company, which he started a few years ago. And that was inspiring from his own allergies that he suffered from being indoors when studying. And he produced a product now that monitors all of those harmful things within the air. And this has accelerated, especially during COVID times. As I mentioned, Rexy and Roland are two other entrepreneurs who started and co-founded Kumu, which is the largest social media platform in the Philippines and globally entertaining Philippines everywhere. As we know, a lot of Philippines work overseas. So we're really excited to be bringing you episode 1. We sit back, grab a coffee and listen and enjoy. And thank you for watching.
Very good. Thank you for the introduction, Michael. Joining us today is Manny Ayala, the Managing Director of Endeavor Philippines. Manny, can you tell us how you got to Endeavor before we discuss how Endeavor works?
Okay. I would say a little bit of a circuitous route to get to Endeavor. Starting with, I guess, my personal mission statement coming out of university. So I would say that back then was very clear, right? Is to unleash potential in other people. And I guess the first iteration of that was unleashing potential through the media, right? To use the media to educate and inform. So I would say the first 10 years of my professional life in the media was, I guess, part reporter. So I was a reporter at ABS-CBN, so in front of the camera. And after that, business school, and then back to media behind the camera, working for companies like Turner Broadcasting and Discovery Channel, helping to launch channels across the Asia Pacific. So first 10 years of my life, unleash potential through media. And the next phase really was to try to unleash potential, but this time through entrepreneurs, right? And so during the tail end of the first dot-com boom, I helped to set up an incubator in Hong Kong. My partners were, I guess, the ex-managing director of Lehman Brothers, some guys from Morgan Stanley in Hong Kong who were very interested in building the next generation of companies, tech-enabled companies. And so we set up to create an incubator, but as luck or misfortune would have it, the internet bubble burst right around the time we incorporated. And I guess very soon after we had to pivot that business because it no longer worked during a moment of, I guess, carnage. Instead, we then pivoted to a boutique M&A shop, right? So we were a M&A shop operating across the Asia Pacific, helping companies figure out what to do with all these portfolios they had invested lots and lots of money into. On the back of that, I set up an incubator, a tech incubator in Manila sometime in 2012, which I guess has given birth to companies like Rappler, which is an online news company, a company called Pawn Hero, which is an online pawn shop, and a digital marketing company called Purple Click. Somewhere along the way, the folks at Endeavor, the folks who were in charge of growing Endeavor in the Asia Pacific, contacted me, and I loved the mission. I thought to myself, with my incubator, maybe I'll do one investment a year or one company a year. But with Endeavor, the objective was to go and bring 5 to 6 new companies into the network every single year. So I kind of weighed those two together, and I said, you know what, more impact through Endeavor. So here I am.
Okay, and what's the history of Endeavor? Where was it started? Who started it? And then how did they branch out to the Philippines and other nations in Asia?
Yes, right. So Endeavor was started about 22 years ago by 2 Americans, Linda Rotenberg and Peter Kellner. And this was, I guess, kind of in the mid-90s, or the latter half of the mid-90s. And they were looking for a way to help entrepreneurs across the world, right? And this got its start really in South America. It's actually a funny story, right? Because the founder, Linda Rotenberg, as she was trying to figure out the best way to help entrepreneurs, she found herself in Buenos Aires, right? And in Buenos Aires, she was taking taxi cabs all over the place. She's a very chatty woman. Ended up having a conversation with the taxi driver, right? And discovered that this taxi driver had a PhD in engineering. And then Linda says, well, what are you doing driving a cab? And then the driver says, well, what do you expect me to do? Work for the government? And she says, no, that's not what I meant. What I meant was, look at people just like yourself, up north in the US. They are starting companies, right? They're building new things, and they're killing it. And then what he said really led to her own sort of catharsis. Like he said, well, how do you expect me to do that here in a place like Argentina, where 20 families control the economy? And I, on the other hand, I have no connections, I have no capital, and I have no credibility. And I would say that's where the idea of Endeavor was born. So she said, from this point on, I'm going to dedicate myself to giving people just like this taxi driver the capital, the credibility, the network to go and do their thing as entrepreneurs. So it started in Argentina. Today, we're in 37 countries across all continents except for Australia. And we continue to stake our territory in new places every year, right? So at some point, I guess the number will be 40. At some point, it will be 50. So the march continues.
Okay, and how did it start up in the Philippines? When did it start?
So we started we opened up the office in January of 2015. But as I said, kind of 2014, I was in lots of discussions with the person who was responsible for growing it in Asia. Her name was Cindy Ko. This kind of I actually said no for over a year, right? Because I was busy with my incubator. But as I mentioned, the light bulb went off when I considered, well, how much help and how much impact could I create with my little incubator versus how much impact could I make with a platform like Endeavor, which is, in the end, a global network. So 2015 of January, that's when it started. I think we were country number 23 or 24. So I guess to start off, Endeavor is a global nonprofit, right? And our mission really is to grow economies through entrepreneurship, right? Grow economies by scaling up entrepreneurs. And it's not just any entrepreneurs. We call these entrepreneurs high impact entrepreneurs, right? So they're we'd say relatively rare breed of entrepreneurs, right? What does a high impact entrepreneur mean? It's really just 3 things. Number 1, these are entrepreneurs with the best ideas and with the capacity to realize them. Number 2, high impact entrepreneurs are those who scale up their companies to then create, enormous amounts of wealth, right? And to create lots and lots of jumps. And then finally, you're high impact as an entrepreneur when you do one thing. And this is what's to me most special and most unique about Endeavor. You're high impact when you pay it forward, right? You're high impact when you reinvest your success in the next generation of entrepreneurs. Well, how do you do that? Well, what we expect of our entrepreneurs is once they become successful, we expect them to mentor other entrepreneurs. We expect them to share their networks and their contacts with other entrepreneurs. And in many cases, we expect them to invest money in other entrepreneurs. So all we're asking of them is to do to these other entrepreneurs what we do to our entrepreneurs, right? Because we help our entrepreneurs in 5 ways, right? We give them access to 5 things. First is we give them access to mentors. So we now have a global network of about 5,000 business leaders, right? So these would be very, very successful corporate executives. So we have, on any given moment, dozens of people who are running, management consulting companies like Bain and McKinsey and BCG, people from private equity companies, people from the big corporates that you can think of, people who are successful entrepreneurs like Reid Hoffman. He sits on the board of Endeavor and is the head of our investment committee. So network of 5,000 mentors, as well as a network of over 2,000 peers, right? These are entrepreneurs who are officially Endeavor entrepreneurs. Second is we give them access to markets. So again, as I mentioned, we're now in 37 markets. And if you're trying to expand your business and get into other markets, I would say there's no other network like Endeavor, where rather than pounding the pavement or doing cold calling, instead what you get is an incredibly warm introduction from members of the network. So in a matter of weeks, we can help you connect with the people that matter as you're trying to set up in a given country. Third is access to capital. And really we help in 2 ways. We will connect you with what we call mentor capital, right? So we have dozens and dozens of experts in private equity and venture capital and investment banking who can help you figure out what you need to do to raise money, right? And who you should raise it from, how much you should raise, how do you position your company, and who are the specific companies or venture capital companies that you should be approaching. Fourth is access to talent. And here we really focus on 2 things. One is focus on the talent of the entrepreneurs themselves. And to do this, we have executive education programs that we've co-developed with 3 business schools. That would be Harvard Business School, Stanford Business School, and INSEAD in their Singapore campus. And really what that is a week of executive education, typically conducted during the summer. On the other side of that is we bring talent to you, right? We bring talent to the companies. We have programs, again, with probably a dozen of the leading business schools. And we also have a joint program with EY and with Bain, where they send professionals, they parachute in to a company for several weeks to focus on specific issues. And then finally, we give them access to a platform that makes it a lot easier for them to pay it forward. Right? So we give them ample opportunity to do mentoring. We give them lots of opportunities to do speaking in public, whether on television, on the internet, or in conferences. We also give them opportunities to serve on the boards of Endeavor, right? In local countries, or in some cases on the global board. And then finally, we give them the opportunity also to invest in our fund, right? Oh, sorry, I think I forgot to mention the second part of access to capital, which is we do have a fund. We actually raised Fund 3 in the middle of the pandemic last year, and that's a $134 million fund. And what's interesting about this fund is half of the carry goes back into Endeavor, so it's part of our sustainability model. And it's also a passive rules-based fund, right? So passive means we never lead around. We always kind of look to our friends in our global network of VCs and private equity companies to do all the hard work of due diligence and negotiation. We just follow. And the rules are very simple. We can only invest in Endeavor companies. We will invest only up to 10% of a given round, and you have to be raising at least $5 million or more. As a result of all these 22 years of doing Endeavor, I think we're convinced that it's actually working, that it actually does something, to the world. I'll just end with 4 statistics. So we now have over 2,000 high impact entrepreneurs out of over 60,000 screened. So you can do the math, right? So 2 out of 60 or 2,000 out of 60,000. Collectively, they generate revenues of about $25 billion a year. They've created over 4 million jobs, and we've helped these companies raise over $3.5 billion in equity.
That's fantastic. And are there any notable companies that you supported that perhaps we would recognize by name?
You know, the question you're asking me is like asking me who's my favorite kid. So I'd like to think that all of them are notable, and we help them all in a certain way. But for those, I guess, that have been in the news, and entrepreneur number one was Nick Snoliedo, who started a company called Surpass that actually ended up listing on the Philippine Stock Exchange. I think that was the first consumer internet company to list in the Philippines. There's a fintech company called Coin, started by a gentleman named Ron Hose, and that was sold to Gojek last year, right? If I'm not mistaken, for close to $75 million. So I would say of the Endeavor entrepreneurs, that was our first strategic exit, right? We have some of our guests today, I think, are very noteworthy. So Dustin Onghanseng, who you'll hear from later on, really the first hardware entrepreneur out of the Philippines, right? He's building a fantastic air quality sensor, first of its kind. And the other guests later on, Roland Ross and Rexy, they built an amazing, innovative media company, right, called Kumu, which is a social media live streaming platform. I'll just rattle off some of the other companies. Maybe you've heard of some of these companies. Let's see. So you're from Cebu, right? Kenneth Cobonpue, who is the iconic furniture design maker. And really what we've helped him do, right, is think, I guess, a little bit more strategically about his global expansion, right? And so we've connected him, with some of the leading sort of luxury brand experts out of Europe and the US. There's Steve Benitez, another Cebuano like you, who started Bose Coffee, which is the Starbucks killer, I like to say, in this country. He started Bose Coffee even before Starbucks made it to the Philippines. And we've been helping him recently in thinking about how he can use digital technology to level up his game.
That's very interesting. So it's not all internet related or computer related. It's also the typical, bricks and mortar type of businesses that go to Endeavor.
Absolutely. We like to say that we are industry agnostic. And, if I had to guess, what the ratio was between tech and non-tech, I would say it's probably about 60% tech and 40% non-tech, right? And, obviously this changes from year to year. Some of the non-tech ones that people in the Philippines might be familiar with would be Zark's Burgers, right? It's a burger chain. It's an amazing story of somebody who was an OFW, came back because he had this passion for cooking and grew it into a multi-chain burger restaurant, which now has franchisees. Another one would be, I think, the pioneer in waxing, right? This is a waxing salon chain called Laybear, which now has over 100 locations across the Philippines and continuing to grow.
And who are the mentors that help these entrepreneurs? Aside from former startup owners, are there people from other industries that you bring in, or maybe even other countries?
Absolutely. So I would say there's a global network of mentors, again, from all walks of life. So we tend to look at kind of two categories in our mentor network. There are the generalists. So those would be people like management consultants and investment bankers, from, the typical places like Bain, McKinsey, BCG, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, who've studied lots of industries in depth, right? So they are generalists. And then we also have people who have either a functional expertise or an industry expertise, right? So you name the industry, we have people in it. One of the board members in Endeavor in Arkansas is a member of the Walmart family, right? So if you're trying to understand, big retail like that, that's potentially if they have the time, right? Somebody you could connect with to get some advice. Here in the Philippines, we have about 50 mentors. And I'm sure you know most of them already, Miguel, right? So in addition to our own board members, of which one of them is your cousin, Monchu. He's a board member of Endeavor Philippines. We have people like, Javi Infante from Navigar, which is a private equity company. You have people like TG Limcalco, who was just recently appointed CEO of BPI. You have people like Ben Avancenia, who used to run J&J out of China, right? Art Tan, who's the CEO of the electronics and industrials company IMI. So it's people of that caliber, right? People who are top of their game and are willing to spend some of their time helping entrepreneurs.
Is there anybody from outside the Philippines who is considered an active mentor for startups in the Philippines? Perhaps somebody from Hong Kong or Thailand?
Yeah. Over the years, there have been for sure, right? And one of the ones who's always helping us, right, because he loves the Philippines, is Jim Lafferty. I don't know if any of you know Jim Lafferty. He used to be in YPO Philippines here. At one point, he was running, I think it was P&G here, then Coca-Cola, I think somewhere in Africa, then came back to do BAT, British American Tobacco, right? So there are people for sure who are not in the Philippines but have a love for the Philippines.
How has COVID pandemic changed the way Endeavor works?
I would say the easy answer is that our life is now purely online, right? And I guess we're lucky that we operate in a sector where physical contact or in-person presence is not required, right? So all of our interviews, right, these 1-hour assessments, that's now done online. Even before that, when we were doing our research and looking for people, that's now done online. Our Shark Tank events, whether the local ones or the global ones, that is now done all online. During the pandemic, when we were closing the fund, all of those conversations were done online. I think what it's meant for our entrepreneurs is they've had to sort of rethink how to do things, especially those that are or historically have been reliant on in-person contact for their business. So places like Lay Bear, places like Zark's Burgers, places like Bo's Coffee, right? So as I said, Bo's Coffee has just launched a service called Bo's Coffee Daily, where there's a platform where you can order, then it gets delivered, or you can arrange for pickup. Zark is beginning to look at digital marketing much more closely, right? So I think it really has impacted the way they look at digital. So another thing is all of our payments, right? We now do 100% online. So back in the day, maybe we were a little bit lazy. We would continue to go to the bank to transact, right? Just because that's the way we've always done it. But during the pandemic, we made a commitment, like 100% digital for all of our financial needs. It is my pleasure to introduce a very special entrepreneur, Dustin Onghanseng, who is the founder and CEO of Yuhu. And as I mentioned, he runs a company that produces the first, piece of sophisticated hardware out of the Philippines, right, in our network. It is an air quality sensor. I'll let him describe what that is. But before I let him speak, it's interesting background because Dustin is an ex-management consultant. And I will let him tell his story, but the reason he decided to invent Yuhu was because he was an MBA student in Hong Kong trying to prove something to the university, right, about the air quality in that university. And I guess the last thing I will say before I let Dustin take the floor is during the pandemic, Dustin used his smarts to try to make an impact in trying to fight COVID. And again, I'll let Dustin tell his own story. So without much further ado, Dustin Onghanseng, CEO and founder of Yuhu. Take it away, Dustin.
All right. Thank you, Manny. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Miguel, for having me here. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yeah, so my name is Dustin. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Yuhu. And our story began back when we were doing our MBA, as Manny mentioned, back in Hong Kong. That's where I met my co-founder. So during business school, we had our allergies attack us very often. I have allergic rhinitis. My co-founder has asthma. And whenever we were inside the dormitories or inside the school building, we would not feel so good. Our allergies would happen. But whenever we leave the building, it feels a lot better. So that happened not only to us, but also to other students. So we realized that it wasn't just something that is particular with us or something wrong with us. It actually affects everybody. So it has something to do with the environment. And since we're particularly sensitive to it, we feel what's going on. And the buildings weren't really managed properly simply because there was no information, there's no data. So that's when it dawned on us that you can only manage what you measure. So it always starts with the data because from there, knowing is half the battle already. And that's when we started to think about this idea. We used this idea in different MBA pitch competitions. We went to different countries to get feedback. And we realized that this has legs. We knew there's something we can do about it. So 1 year into the program, both of us dropped the classes and started a company. So it took us approximately 3 years of R&D to build this because building hardware to work with software is not easy. Even though my co-founder's background is in mechatronic engineering, it still takes time to build hardware and software. So 3 years of R&D later, we eventually launched Yuhu into the market in late 2017. So we've been in the market for 3 years now. We initially tried to target the consumer market, but at the back of our heads, we knew that there is a larger market in the corporate sector, in commercial buildings, in hotels, in hospitals, in warehouses and factories, because it's really all about how do we enhance people's health. That has always been our ethos, our North Star. And so we started building the company. We started off with the consumer market. We eventually ventured into the corporate market. And in approximately 2.5 years' time, 2.5 years' time, we already have tens of thousands of customers across Asia Pacific, the US, and across Europe. And when COVID-19 happened, we knew that from the very beginning that the air quality had something to do with it. So we did some research on the initial coronavirus back in 2003, the SARS-CoV-1. And we realized that the genetic makeup of the coronavirus today and back then is pretty similar. So how the environment affects them would be pretty similar as well, as science has shown. And since we have the capability to monitor and manage the environment, we created this thing called the Yuhu Virus Index. So this is the world's first. We patented it. We're the only ones who are able to give you a real-time assessment of the risk of the coronavirus surviving and becoming transmittable in the air. We do not measure the virus itself because that's not possible today. What we do is we help you understand whether your environment is conducive for the virus to survive. So if you are able to reduce the risk of the virus surviving, your risk of exposure goes down as well. Because in a typical environment, according to science, if your humidity is approximately 80%, which is a normal humidity here in the Philippines and across tropical countries, and if you keep your temperature at a certain level, the coronavirus can survive for approximately 14 days. But if you're able to manage the different parameters, have proper ventilation, have proper humidity, you can reduce it to 36 hours. So you're basically cutting down the survival rate of the virus, thereby lowering your risk. So this is one of the more innovative things that we've done. And just recently, just yesterday, we launched a new product. It's called the Yuhu Aura. So that product was designed based on our conversations and our experience with talking to our commercial customers on what kind of product they really want to see in the future. So this one was designed from 15 months of conversations and discussions and experience with our clients. So we launched it yesterday and we start shipping in April. And just on the launch yesterday, we already received quite a number of pre-orders from some companies already. So yeah, that's a brief introduction about what we do.
So Dustin, could you explain, obviously congratulations on your launch of the new product. It's very exciting. Can you explain what Aurora is?
Yes, Yuhu Aura is the most comprehensive air monitoring or environmental monitoring system in the market. If we look at the different products in the market, it can measure 1 to 5 parameters depending on the brand. We measure at least 13 parameters. So when you pit us against any other product in the market, we are definitely the best because when we design it, that's how we want to design products. And we also created multiple connectivity options that allows the corporate sector to deploy it in their buildings. Because based from experience, a lot of companies, especially banks, don't want us to connect to their Wi-Fi network. They view it as a security risk. So to address that, what we've done is we created an option for you to just slot in a SIM card, to do a wired connection, and yeah, basically multiple different types of connections. So it eases the deployment. It eases the mindset of there might be risk in using the solution. We're basically removing all of that with this new product. And of course, we help our clients get certification as well on sustainability standards, because that's something that we really want to push as a company. It's about how do we help achieve the UN SDGs? How do we help companies become more sustainable?
And on that point, obviously, ourselves at Pacific Basin Economic Council, we've been doing a series on supply chain resilience and the value proposition of, there's been talk about reshoring and other areas within the supply chain due to COVID. Have you learned any lessons in terms of, actually producing a new product and then supplying that new product to market? Has there been any lessons learned and any changes that are being adopted in your supply chain, your own supply chain?
Well, COVID really affected the supply chain quite a fair bit, actually a lot. But I guess we were lucky back then because a month prior to the pandemic happened, we pre-ordered a whole bunch of units already. So we already had the raw materials in the factory, and we just needed to produce it as and when the demand came. So we didn't really get affected by in terms of the supply chain. But something that we learned is that as we produce this new product, the supply chain is still being affected today. So we had to give a lot more lead time in terms of procuring the raw materials, because a lot of the other factories, they also had to procure raw materials, and it lengthened their lead time. So it affected the whole supply chain down the road. Yeah. And another thing that we learned was that all the logistical costs went up because it was much more difficult to move products around. So essentially our costs went up as well, but that's something that we need to manage on an operational level. So it's more of creating that proper contingency plan. Because something that's unique with us is we have a whole supply chain that we need to handle, as opposed to just having a software.
And you mentioned there about achieving, the UN SDGs targets. Obviously, a very hot topic right now, especially here in Hong Kong as a financial center, is the ESG reporting requirements of the public companies. But there's obviously attention now that these could form a standard, not just for public, but also for private entrepreneurs and enterprises looking to raise capital. It could be a requirement. I just thought, should ESG efforts or achieving UN SDGs be part of a startup or scale-up company DNA?
I think it should be part of the DNA from the very beginning. Because when we start a company, it shouldn't be all about profits. It has to be there has to be a purpose. When we started Yuhu, when we designed the supply chain, when we designed the product, we made sure that we use sustainable materials. We made sure that the products would be disposed properly, if in case it comes back to us. So those are things that we really wanted to focus on. And when it comes to addressing the UN SDG, we are very focused on SDG 3, which is health and well-being, because that's the kind of value we provide to our customers. We also focus on SDG 5, which is gender equality. When you look at our team, we make sure that more than 50% of our team would be women. So we want to keep that balance. We also look at SDG 11, which is how do we create smart and sustainable cities? Because the world needs to be sustainable. If not, we're like killing ourselves.
Wonderful. So that's just to finish, I guess, bringing it back to Endeavor. How has Endeavor helped you scale up your business since you started 3 years ago? I guess the conversations were even prior to that, but can you just finish up by explaining how they've helped?
Yes, Endeavor helped tremendously in our journey. The most important help that they gave was really advice on how we can structure the business, how we approach the market, and also connecting us with people. So it was Endeavor who introduced us to some of our investors, and it was really quick. We went straight to the decision maker. Conversation happened, just one conversation, and the investor said, "Oh, I like your business. I see where this is going." And we were able to fill up the round much faster with Endeavor there. Prior to that, it was much more difficult because VCs tend to wait for each other. But when we get a bunch of people to come together really quick, it helps the VC to the fear of missing out from the VC sector. Yeah. So that was really helpful as well.
I think it's a wonderful initiative.
Just to continue on that vein, for our audience that is listening in, Dustin will be, I guess, starting a new funding round, right, soon.
End of the year, yes.
Yeah, it's always good to get that out there because obviously there are people here listening who are looking for opportunities to deploy capital, especially in Asia, emerging markets, and in products that do have a high esteem for achieving these ESG and UN SDG targets now. I think that's becoming more and more important for millennial investors, but also those mature investors as well. I think part of every fund manager's in tray now is to make sure that they are up to date with all of these requirements. And when they're looking at deploying capital, whether it's family office or institutional funds, they are making sure that that box is definitely ticked. And it sounds like you're well on the way, Dustin, in achieving that in the segment that you're in. It's wonderful to hear your story, and thanks to Manny for bringing you along today. So we're going to be heading into a short break now. And when we come back, we'll be hearing from a few more entrepreneurs that have been doing wonderful things under Endeavor. Thank you so much.
This episode was supported by Make It Happen in the Philippines, the ideal investment destination. Located within one of the world's fastest growing economies, the Philippines is an ideal investment destination, offering businesses unique access to a large consumer market and excellent trade options both within Asia and beyond. Our business-friendly laws attract international companies into the Philippines, and with a government committed to creating a business-friendly landscape, there has never been a better time to make it happen in the Philippines.
It is my distinct pleasure to introduce to our audience today the co-founders of Kumu, Roland Ross and Rexy Dorado. And they have an amazing story to tell, and I'm not going to steal their thunder. But suffice it to say that they have completely and utterly disrupted the media industry in this country. They run a social media live stream company, and they've grown 10x in the last 12 months. And I actually need to do a shout out to Rexy and Roland today because they are smack in the middle of raising a Series B funding round. And I know they haven't really been sleeping, but they've carved out time in their busy schedule to be with us today. So thank you very much, Roland and Rexy. And with that, over to you.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. I think it's, we feel very lucky. I think right now, if you can tell by Rexy's face, doing all the confirmatory due diligence on this B has, really put us in a nice position to really start 2021 strong. But yeah, I mean, I think without further ado, I'd love to just make this super conversational, from a background perspective. I'm actually Filipino American. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. And, growing up in Los Angeles, I never really knew the Filipino side of me outside of Filipino food. And, I actually had an opportunity to study abroad in the Philippines and fell in love and fell more at home in the Philippines than I did back home in the United States. And I never gave up on that dream that someday that I would actually come back to the Philippines. And so after graduation, I became an entrepreneur, had an opportunity to experience an exit in the performance marketing and advertising technology space. And so with that money, I was able to finally go back and follow my dream to go to the Philippines. But most of that work was really in humanitarian work, nonprofit work. And that's actually where I was able to meet Rexy. While he was a student at Brown, he was born in the Philippines, but actually went to school in the US. And when he told me about his nonprofit of finding some of the most promising students in the US to go on these 2-month life-changing internships in the Philippines, it really reminded me of the way that my life was changed when I was a college student who went to the Philippines. And so by helping him on this nonprofit, we started seeing very similar things that occurred in my life. Someone who rejected their job offer at Amazon to decide to start an AI company in Manila, or instead of being an investment banker in New York, they decided to help a family business in Metro Manila. And so story after story, our work caught the attention of the Philippine ambassador to the United States, Jose Quisha. And when he approached us and said, Roland, you have this track record of you do entrepreneurship and business and advertising and technology in the US, but when you come to the Philippines, your engagement is mostly in a humanitarian or community service capacity. And one of the things that he was really challenging us is really recognizing, right, according to the World Economic Forum, hundreds of millions of middle-class jobs being created in the ASEAN region. The whole concept of digital transformation taking storm in the region, and saying, like, maybe the next time you come back, instead of another community service project, like a clean water, have you ever thought about engaging in an actual enterprise? And so that type of conversation really stirred with my soul, actually. And that's when I actually had this conversation with Rexy. It's like, Rexy, what are your thoughts? And he shared with me that, one of the things, ironically, Manny, some experience because he was an intern at Endeavor, was this whole concept of building a network effect of how we could actually be entrepreneurs in the Philippines. And so from there, that is the initial foundation of why we went back to the Philippines to start a company. Because with both of our experiences in humanitarian and nonprofit work, we felt that, to Ambassador Quisha's call, maybe creating technology jobs and supporting the technology ecosystem of the Philippines was a better way of giving back to the country than doing another nonprofit project. So that's just generally the foundation. So yes, from a thesis perspective, it's all about building a consumer internet company that really prioritizes the voices of Filipinos. And to Manny's point, we found that foothold, or that beachhead, through building a live streaming app that engages millions of Gen Zs and millennial Filipinos. But I think from a vision perspective, Rexy and I are really focused around continuing to build consumer internet opportunities through this community that we've engaged. So I mean, I don't know if that's just kind of like a quick introduction of what we've been able to do. Rexy, I mean, from a track record, we became the #1 highest grossing social app in the Philippines. But because of the global nature of Filipinos all around the world, we also became the #4 highest grossing social app in New Zealand, #9 in Australia, top 10 in Hong Kong, Japan. We ranked Singapore #8 in Norway, #9 in the United Kingdom, and top 5 in Middle East countries like Kuwait and UAE, and even the #10 highest grossing social app in Canada. So it's been really cool to see a Filipino app ranking this highly for the first time in international markets because of the Filipino diaspora and its position of sending so much funds back home to the Philippines. Last I count, I think it was around $35 billion plus that they remit back home every year.
Yeah,
Wow,
and on the other
that's
side
a
too,
lot
I
of
think
money.
was just as important is that, to tie back to what Roland was saying earlier about kind of opportunities that are powered by consumer tech, right? And the work that Endeavor does also is now that we call it the virtual gifting economy, or if you watch a live stream, you like what the creator has to say, you send them an animated gift that kind of shows your appreciation. That now is, on the other side, is providing almost 1,000, right? 800 some full-time creators who are earning the equivalent of double minimum wage in the Philippines. It's also, on the team side, we've gone from probably 10 people in 2017 to 10 people in 2017 to 2018 to about 50 people before the COVID lockdowns, to 150 people on our 150 full-time employees now, who we're very proud of in terms of the work that they're doing. And also this community of 6,000, 7,000 hardcore volunteers who are helping keep this community safe and engaged, and who really spend, some of them spend 60, 80 hours a week on the app. So it's their life, right? And it's this place where they've found some kind of community and connection that they can't find anywhere else.
Yep. Rexy, can you tell us, in a quick way, what is the content that's available in Kumu and how is it delivered?
Rex, I mean, because the quick thing is, It's a digital version of street performance. So you know when you see someone in the subway or on the street and they're playing the guitar, and when they're playing the guitar, what do? If you like their content, you give them a 10 peso coin, or you put a 20 peso bill in their guitar case or in their cup, right? And so what we are actually able to do is we do that digitally, and millions of gifts are sent every single day. And that seems to be what is the difference between our app and others, because of the authentic connection that occurs. Because this is a social platform that, hey, on the viewer side, you're not recognizing content for views, you're not recognizing content for likes, you're actually recognizing content with an actual financial transaction that occurs in real time. And for the creator, the reason why it's authentic is because it's 100% live. So as a live streaming content, as opposed to pre-recorded content that you see on YouTube, or hiding behind your keyboard and engaging in toxic behaviors like you see on Twitter and Facebook, there's something very real, raw, and authentic for Gen Zs and millennials to express themselves in a live format. So it's really those two key things. On the viewer side, oh, cool, I like your content. Here's a 20 peso coin that I'm going to put in your digital guitar case or your digital cup. And then on the creator side, they're actually, doing this in a real, raw format. So when you actually take this experience and you multiply that by, 8 million registered users, and, we've seen revenue grow 10x, we don't publicly share, but it's in the several $million range per month in revenue. It's a very exciting business to be in, because it's
just in terms of content, it's more than just music, right? Just to address Miguel's question, it's way more than just music that's available, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is hanging out with each other. It's called Tambay, is one of the most popular hashtags. There's also wellness, dancing, singing. There's a lot of things around particular niches. So that's the most important thing from a long tail perspective. It could be as small as, I like to paint Game of Thrones miniatures, or I like to cosplay anime, all the way down to things that are broad about, things like sports, or what's really been taken off is like hip hop culture and Filipino based music. So it's not just music, but Filipino based music, or something around the geolinguistic nature of the Filipino. So it's not just Tagalog or English, but mga Bisaya, Waray, Ilocano, Bicolano. But then you put that on a layer with people who are in Saudi Arabia or in the United States. There's a really rich diversity that really occurs across the different languages. So you see language as content too, because Filipino media is so dominated by just Tagalog or English.
And can the audience comment and it's publicly viewed, or they comment with each other, or can they post messages on the presenter?
Yes, so it's similar to kind of how the Zoom call would look, right? If it were for a multi-guest kind of live stream at least, but you have a comment box at the bottom where you can have you'd have six kind of hosts who are on screen or who are on speaker, but then like 10, 100, sometimes 1,000 people in the comments who are sending their support, asking questions, and the streamer talks back in real time. And by real time we mean less than a second to 1 or 2 seconds, versus I think on Instagram and YouTube their live streams have a 20 to 30 second delay, or sometimes greater, whereas for us we really focus on the kind of real time connection, and the audience really being a part of whatever show they're watching.
So something embarrassing happened to me, Miguel. I'm confessing now in public, okay? Very publicly. The first time I tried it, right? Because I didn't know what it was, right? I go in, and the person, I guess, whose show it is, says, "Oh, welcome to the show, Manny Ayala." And I didn't know what to do. So I clicked leave and I left. Now I know what to do, right? Now I know it's like a Zoom call.
Yeah, well, who is your most followed star in Kumu?
It's actually, so that's one of the cool things about a passion economy. It's really about embracing what we call the content creator middle class, where you actually only need a couple hundred followers, because it's gifting. So there's something authentic. And so we have this metric called the financially successful creator, someone who earns around 20,000 pesos a month, all the way up to, say, like right here, Baby Bear. She earned, Rexy, how much does Baby Bear make? How much did she make? And her biggest like.
I think private, but
sorry, but we've seen
yeah, but we've seen people go up to to $10,000, $20,000 a month. I think some people have earned like $30,000, $40,000 a month just from less than 100 engaged, less than 100 hyper engaged fans and followers. I think our average financially successful creator. 13 loyal followers who constantly, they watch almost every single stream that they do.
Yeah, because it's more about, it's not so much one to many, right? Like getting millions of followers. So in this case, this baby bear, she has 24,000 followers. So that's a lot, but that's not like super famous. But 24,000 followers is enough to earn for this person who lives in Mindoro far above what what other people make in her area, right? So, we've seen cases like this where, they catch the attention of, say, someone who is Bisaya in Saudi Arabia or in Canada or Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan. And what they do is they appreciate her content and, they're earning just enough for them to earn full time. So I think, yes, we do have some very famous people on the app, but we drive very famous people to generate a lot of downloads. But once they're in the community, we put them into a user journey for them to find what we call your tribe, your chosen family, or your second family. And it is in this environment at scale where you could actually create your own world of, say, 20 to 30,000 people who follow you. And so, yes, that's not the millions of followers that people you see, say, like on a TikTok or an Instagram. It's more of like, how do you find your tribe and create your own world inside of it? And how can Kumu put that at scale where you have thousands and thousands of these, tribes or families inside of Kumu? So it's not like we're trying to create people with millions of followers. It's really about creating, helping people find their own world, if you will.
And you mentioned already the use of this platform across 5 major languages in the Philippines, and I'm sure this can be regulated all over Asia with 20 or 30 different languages and cultures. Are there any plans for that?
It is a question. I think for us, our biggest defensibility does come from embracing the Filipino, like for example, like VNG Corporation building a $2 billion app ecosystem, prioritizing the voices of the Vietnamese market, or say like what Gojek was able to do in Indonesia, or what really inspires us too is what Kakao was able to do in Korea. And I think for us to stay focused gives us that defensibility. Now, we have talked to, say, some of the biggest apps in the world about a multi-market strategy. And I think based off of what we were able to do here in the Philippines, working with the key business families and the key conglomerates, working on the key content providers and those types of things, that if we were to explore another market like Indonesia or say like Vietnam, it would have to be in not collusion, that's not a good word, but in partnership with other key families in that country and other key content providers in that country, so that we work together on that type of thing. Because the thing is, the moment we start going into other markets, then it's like, oh, ByteDance or whatever. Oh, you want to compete with me? All right, let's do this. Or we could be like, hey, ByteDance, you did a great job with TikTok. Let's work together on these other markets, right? So I think for us, it is particularly early. We have to really dominate and own and really build a defensible business in the Philippines before we go to another market. And I think that's actually one of our biggest competitive benefits, because we're like in this 1 year, 2 year execution window where so many people are really excited about markets like Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand, while at the same time we're building a consumer internet company on one of the largest emerging market economies in the world. So we really want to have a defensible business where we're big enough that we don't get wiped out, but we're big enough to either get an investment or an acquisition offer or a commercial partnership with some of these behemoths, that if and when they do decide to come into the Philippines, we're prepared.
Yeah, so the international is definitely, it's a door and it's something that's interesting to us, but what we're most excited about still, at least for the next 1, 2, 3 years is within the Philippines, right? And so that's kind of even within our existing app, there are parts there like the audio streaming and the e-commerce and the and a lot of people, especially in the audio live streams, they kind of create their own games that they play within the audio stream. So there's kind of a gaming behavior that's happening there too. So all of those are kind of adjacent markets that we've only started to scratch the surface of. At the same time, they're kind of like if we're able to crack e-commerce, and that starts to make it a possibility for us to get into things like payments in like a 3 to 5 year timeline that start to go into the day-to-day needs of people rather than just kind of just the pure social kind of behavior. So we'll do it a step at a time, but we think there's really a deep opportunity here in the Philippines, and at the same time it's super. Our sense is we're in this 2-3 year window where people are just not recognizing how powerful the Philippines can be by kind of orders of magnitude, right? Where it's, there's obviously a lot of growth within the country. At the same time, there's this entire diaspora that's a tenth of the global Filipino population, but has as much kind of buying power and as much kind of aggregate income as the entire Philippines, or more or less. And also, we're starting to see this emergent behavior of I think one of Roland's like favorite stories is this girl from Wales who's like she's not Filipino at all, but she's like a Filipino culture fan, the same way people are fans of like Korean and Japanese culture, right? She has her username is like something. So that tells us that there is a possibility of Filipino culture breaking through in like global culture, and Filipino talents being able to reach global audiences in the same way that Korean and Japanese culture have, right? So all of that I think speaks to just how much depth of opportunity there is by just focusing on the Philippines.
Yeah, Roland, you mentioned the social part, but I noticed from your website you've got 4 different offerings. One is social TV, one is community, the other is e-commerce and partnership. How do the other 3 work?
Yeah, absolutely. So from an e-commerce perspective is our next adjacent. So I was talking about our microtransaction business, right? The virtual gifts. And so we're like, wow, we have we see the psychological buying power of what could happen if you generate a multi-million-dollar business of virtual gifts. So then what if this live streamer then says, hi, all my friends and followers, and we saw this with Huawei, buy this Huawei phone. And then they just started buying a bunch of Huawei phones. Or for example, with Team Manila, which is one of the most popular streetwear brands, especially for Gen Zs and millennials, they created a special t-shirt line for us. And we sold out in 30 minutes. We just picked up the shirt and talked about it, and then it sold out. And so we're very excited about that opportunity because it's a community-driven approach to e-commerce that's a lot different than, say, what you currently see in the current offerings with, say, like a Shopee or Lazada. Because for us, it's always been a focus around the community and identifying adjacent business opportunities that are aligned with the community. So when you're talking about these 3 other things, you have the community that engages with each other through a microtransaction business primarily, and then we explore these adjacent opportunities. So yes, the first adjacent opportunity is e-commerce. We're very excited with some of the concepts that we've seen. And then when you go into, say, brand partnerships, that is, for example, right now we're in the middle of a big brand activation with Globe. We've done things with Grab, Angkas, Food Panda has been a great partner. And the reason why they do these brand partnerships with Kumu is because we create content together where they want to have these authentic conversations with our Gen Z and millennial audience. So what we do is we utilize the same mechanism, the microtransaction economy, but instead of a lot of the monetization coming from our users, the monetization comes from brands coming in and actually creating these virtual gifts for us, so that because this is the main part of the authentic connection, right? I'm doing this, and then I receive a virtual gift, and what do you say? Thank you for the virtual gift. Thank you for the halo. Thank you for the taho. But now we have hundreds of thousands of our users over the course of the last several days with Globe saying, thank you for the Globe Home Surf 99. Thank you for the Globe Home Surf 99. I mean, this is better than an ad. because you have Gen Zs and millennials saying, thank you for the, and then insert brand here. And there's something really cool about that type of brand partnership and the type of brand recall that you get from such a mission-driven audience that Gen Zs demand for those brand partnerships. Which brings us to the final part, which is social television or social TV. And basically all that does is they're television shows that instead of just watching TV, any person who is watching TV can be a part of the TV show. And so it's been a great way to generate a lot of user interest for first-time user experience to understand how Kumu works. But then again, it's just all part of a strategy to get people into community. So right now, our top social TV aspect, you guys are familiar of the Big Brother franchise. If you guys don't know, here in the Philippines, there's a Filipino version called Pinoy Big Brother, which is the most popular reality show in the Philippines. And so here, if you actually, part of our social TV concept is you could actually go and see what is happening in real time, what is going on in the pool, what is going on in the dining area or the living room. And it's a really interesting kind of way to integrate television into the audience. So yeah, so those are the other three ways. Or Rexy, if I'm missing anything, but yeah.
Are there any censorship limits where you've had to tone down the content, and how do you do that?
Actually, we do that all the time. So one thing that we learned is because our mascot is a tarsier. It's a very sensitive animal, and it's just as sensitive as the Filipino people. And because of that, it's actually one of our biggest differentiators. So we have a core value around what we call safety, positivity, and acceptance, and we're very unapologetic about those core values because our peg is actually Disneyland, not Instagram or Facebook. Because if you go to a Disneyland and you do not look safe, if you start being negative and creating a ruckus in Disneyland, you will actually be removed from the premises because they have one of the highest and strictest security forces on Earth. And so when someone goes on Kumu, right, if it's not safe, it's not positive, it's not accepting. If they're not accepting, very quickly they get removed from the premises. We say, look. We appreciate and respect your views, but it's very negative and very controversial. This is Disneyland, not Facebook or Instagram. If you want to do that, and then we push them back into Facebook or we push them back into Instagram if they're not being authentic or they're faking. And I think that's very, very, very important for us to really differentiate ourselves as a safe, positive, and accepting place because we don't allow that type of negativity in the app, because Kumu is more of a social entertainment platform than it is a social network or a social media. And I think it's very important that we embrace social entertainment and show that, our peg is more of a Disneyland so that we don't have to deal with, people going on the app and saying a bunch of political stuff. That's not what the app is about. You can do that.
Correct. So Roland, just a quick question for our audience. I think they would appreciate this is, how do you ensure the safety? Is it humans doing the work or is it technology doing the work?
Oh, yeah. So that's actually one of the key things. It's a hybrid type of solution. So right now we have comment filtering technology. We're working on an image recognition SDK, working with some of the top AI recognition softwares to get offending content down. Now, in addition to that, what's so cool about Kumu is to become a core user of Kumu is to join the community, which gives you the right. Your status actually goes up if you have the right to become what you call a content moderator. And so Rexy was alluding this earlier. We have about 7,000 content moderators who oversee our 2 million plus active users. And so what's really interesting about this is by having these army of content creators or content moderators going out and making sure that we have safe, positive, and accepting content is very similar to the way Wikipedia self-polices itself or the way Reddit self-polices itself through Redditors. And it's a very important status-giving symbol to our users that when you have the right to protect Kumu through safety, positivity, and acceptance, we have an army of thousands of people. And when you look at our ratio, that means we have a content moderator for every 250 or so active users. And when you compare that to, say, platforms like Facebook, they have like a content moderator for every 90 to 100,000 active users. So 1 to 250. I mean, for all those who've sent their kids to private school, right, we always look at that teacher to student ratio. So if you look at our teacher to student ratio, it's a lot lower than, say, other social platforms. And I think that's what really makes Kumu a safe place. So when you look at the Philippines, you also look at the Google Temasek report and look at the growth of the internet economy over the next 5 years and start calculating how much of that pie can Kumu absorb. And a lot of that is really based on a lot of key assumptions where, one, you have a market that's on average median age Gen Z and millennial. Number two, there's billions of dollars being spent on internet infrastructure. And number three, a lot of Chinese manufacturers are making iPhone spec phones affordable and selling, these Huawei's, these Xiaomi's, Vivo, Oppos at around $100 a pop. And so when you see this perfect storm of consumer internet market creation, for us, we need to optimize our execution specifically within that framework and track the 4G. Because here's the deal. Kumu as a live streaming app is actually best used in a 5G environment. So the implication is our market and TAM will continue to grow locally while we continue to execute globally with all our diaspora around the world. And I think it's very, very critical for us over the next 2 to 3 years that we pour out an execution schedule that maximizes not just wallet share, but total addressable market share as we track the development of the improvement of 4G LTE and 5G in the Philippines, as well as tracking what I love is how much more affordable these phones get, right?
I will just say that Kumu is perfectly positioned to take advantage of this brewing digital storm, right? The perfect digital storm, right? So Rexy alluded to a few of these elements, right? So on the, the hardware side, right? And the access side, right? Things are getting more expansive, right? And the penetration rates they continue to increase. The other thing that's part of this perfect storm is that we are an extremely young country, right? Average age is about 23. And so when you take those two together, right? Young people plus increasing penetration rates, right? It leads to a third dynamic, which I call ADD. We are a nation of ADD, which means we're addicted to digital devices, and therefore usage is off the charts. I mean, how many reports have you seen? In the old days, it was we are the texting capital of the world, right? Now we've graduated to different kinds of platform. Basically, if it's social media, we're in the top 10 globally, right? Now, the other layer that I think is worth mentioning is that just looking at the Philippines as a economy, right? The macroeconomics of this country have been amazing for the last 10 years or so, right? With, 6% growth a year, pushing us, very squarely into middle-class territory. And if you look out into the future, it's going to get better, not worse, right? And so recently there was a report from a think tank in the UK that said by the year 2035, right, we will be the 16th largest economy, right, in terms of GDP. You take this all together and you say, well, who is perfectly positioned to benefit from this? Well, it's this company designed for millennials and Gen Z that's very much, I think, focused on technology and social media.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, guys. And with that, I thought it was a great summary, Manny, to sum up what the excitement that comes, exudes from Roland and hearing from Rexy as well. I think well underway to being a huge success story, not just in the Philippines, but a poster child for Asia in general. So we wish you all the very best with your Series B and with your future growth. I'm actually going to, after this, go and take a look myself because it sounds very interesting. And, I've always, I guess, fancied myself as a bit of a busker, as we say in the UK.
So basically, since you know the word busking, we call it a digital busking platform. So
yeah, there we go. So look, I want to leave it there with you, Rexy and Roland. Thank you so much for your time and joining us. And hopefully the audience that's listening in have got something very interesting from you both, in terms of a younger audience, but also investors out there are looking for something a little bit different. And I really agree with the fact that Philippines has this ability, certainly just through how they've had to work and immigrate, just like the Irish did back in the day, You find Filipinos everywhere in the economies globally, and I think your app, as it were, is connecting everybody back to home, and I think that's so important during especially COVID times where you've seen exponential growth, and long may it continue. So thank you so much. So Manny, wow, that was amazing to hear two young guys there. In some ways, they sort of crossed paths trans-Pacific. One was going in one direction, one was going in the other, and they both back ended up in the Philippines.
That's right. But who would have thought, right, 10 years ago, right, that we'd have a hardware guy doing something like this, or that we'd have two Philams come back here and completely disrupt, a very big traditional media industry.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all heard of Facebook. In some ways, we were kind of growing up with Facebook because that was the first social network that existed. And then, in the last probably 10 years, we've had, sort of the more speaking apps in terms of WhatsApp, in terms of messaging, and more recently, Instagram and Twitter, obviously, with which was made famous by the previous president, more so than anything else. But there's all these other apps, which have become more nationalistic in some ways, tribal somewhat. And I think uHoo has sort of captured that imagination of the Generation Z. Miguel, any comments from yourself? Obviously, listening to everything, I was also, very pleased to hear from Dustin as well. I think that's also a great observation he had, knowing that the indoor air environment was not healthy for his conditions. And I think that could be said about many cities around Asia, that it's applicable, especially in a studying environment. So it'd be interesting to see how they further their product, because I think it's definitely going to be one in high demand.
Yeah, well, if I were a Philippine government occupational safety person, if companies are willing to share their data, then I could pass on rules or laws that help the workers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. What's interesting is, he does have two markets, right? I don't know if you picked this up. There's a B2C market and a B2B market, right? So they're both very distinct markets. They're both very attractive markets. On the B2C side, he's actually available on Amazon in the US, right? So, he has a lot of customers in the US, and these are, moms at home who are worried about the health of their kids, right? On the other side of that, right, there are huge sort of real estate companies that want this in their buildings, right? So you're seeing this being installed in Singapore, Hong Kong, Europe, right, the Philippines as well. So it's an interesting future for him. And I wonder if he's actually going to have to kind of make a decision, right, about which of these to focus on, or whether it's tenable to do both.
Yeah,
I think it's tenable to do both, right? You may have to put separate people to focus on each, because the way you market and sell is different, and the app that you would use to control and put together the information would be different. Yeah. But I can't see why they can't use the same device for both.
The more, the merrier.
Well, I mean,
it's just,
some of my takeaways,
it's just software.
Yeah, I mean, some of my takeaways, Manny, just going back to what you were saying at the very beginning, and I think it applied there with Kumu speaking, is that circular economy that you're creating when you talked about your entrepreneurs. Once they have had a degree of success, that they're asked to reinvest their time and some money into the entrepreneurship part of endeavor going forward. Pay it forward, as you have as a tag and slogan, which I think is so important that when you come down to the next generations that we've just been discussing, in similar ways, they're also creating that circular economy without realizing it, and creating new jobs in a whole new market segments, which were unheard of only 5 or 6 years ago. And the beauty about all of this digital and e-commerce is it's opening up markets outside of the main hub. So you've mentioned you've got an office in Manila, but you're able to connect across the Philippines via digital means now. So I don't think the focus on HQ anymore is so relevant. It's really like everybody's connected via the internet. And I think that's going to be something we need to watch going forward, of how, cities adapt to this change, because I don't think it will all go back to normal in a year or so's time. There'll be a few hard decisions to be made, how they reinvent some of the bricks and mortar that's left behind.
Well, so we're very excited about entrepreneurs like Dustin and entrepreneurs like Roland and Rexy, right? Because they do think about success beyond, an income statement or beyond the share price, right? As you listen to Dustin talk about their North Star, right? It's about making an impact, right? It's about, he focuses on, specific goals within the SDG framework. And you talk to people like Roland and Rexy, they're about community, right? Building communities. And, I remember early on, this is like 2.5 years ago, before they were even in the Endeavor process, they came to us and said, we really love what Endeavor stands for, right? Hopefully one day we'll be cool enough for you, right? Well, I have to tell you, and they're cooler than us. One of their dreams is to sit on the board, of Endeavor in the Philippines. One of their dreams is to be able to spur new entrepreneurs, right? To build, I would say, ancillary businesses to what they're trying to do in Kumu, right? Adjacent businesses to Kumu. And I think that's such a great mindset because, in the end, what we try to encourage our entrepreneurs to think is don't look at success simply as the size of your company, but look at the size of your influence in the ecosystem.
Well, I have to say, Manny and Miguel, it's been a wonderful way to kick off the value proposition series because I really see the value in speaking and learning about these great endeavors, especially in the Philippines. And what a great way to start with the Philippines. We've got more to come with our second episode, which will focus on the Philippines. It just goes to show already we're seeing more content than we ever imagined than when we first had this idea. When I was sitting by the pool, couldn't go anywhere, and I dragged Miguel into this endeavor together, using the pun and using your name, Manny, with good reason. And it was an endeavor ourselves to sort of reach out because we felt our own audience are always hungry for new information. It's all about data. Data is the new gold, as they say. And so the more data information we can get out to our communities and build our own network further, because we're supposed to be, and we are, connecting the region of the 21 member states. And this is a great way to kick it off. So I want to thank you, Manny, for your time today. It's been a wonderful insights into what you're doing. You must be very proud with what you're achieving with Endeavor, and more to come, it looks like, with your new funds. Fund 3, I see on your website, is going to be, if it's not already launched, it's going to be investing in all of these great endeavors further around the region and opening up in more countries, as we heard from you as well. Any last word, Miguel, before we let Manny leave?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question to Manny, and if it works, maybe we should ask the question on all the interviews we do. So, Manny, what value does Endeavor bring?
What value? Are you talking about, like philosophical value or tangible value?
Well, this is the show is called Value Prop, the value proposition.
Yeah.
And so, the key, the last thing said should be something related to value. And then the subject here is Endeavor, right? So if I ask you, what value does Endeavor bring and who does it provide value to?
Right. So I would say that the value we bring is a change in mindset, right? Again, we talked about it a little bit earlier, that success shouldn't simply be based on dollars and cents, right? That success, in fact, is much more expansive, much deeper when you consider, the entirety of the constituents that you are able to impact, right? So I would say, don't think dollars and cents, think impact, right? If you want to be successful, don't just be a taker, be a giver. Which, by the way,
excellent.
One of my favorite books from 2016, which I gave all my board members, it's a book called Give and Take, which, really helped me shape my thoughts on this. It was written by Adam Grant, who is the youngest and most popular tenured professor at the Wharton School. Give and Take. Highly recommended.
Excellent. Thank you.
So with that, folks, thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed episode 1 of this new series called The Value Proposition from PBEC. Thank you to our guests all today, including Manny Ayala, who's joining us from his beautiful home in the forest somewhere in deepest Philippines. And of course, my great co-host, Miguel.
This episode was supported by Make It Happen in the Philippines, the ideal investment destination. Located within one of the world's fastest growing economies, the Philippines is an ideal investment destination, offering businesses unique access to a large consumer market and excellent trade options both within Asia and beyond. Our business-friendly laws attract international companies into the Philippines, and with a government committed to creating a business-friendly landscape, there has never been a better time to make it happen in the Philippines. The Valley Prop Show is brought to you by PBEC, the Pacific Basin Economic Council. Your co-hosts are Miguel Aboitiz and Michael Walsh from PBEC. Produced by Salon Films, a member of PBEC. You can follow and subscribe to us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. Thanks for watching and listening. See you in the next episode.